This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com.
Alpha Natural Resources. Consistent with its Running Right process, Alpha is an energy company committed to being a leader in mine safety and an environmental steward. We fuel progress around the world. More information at alphanr.com.
Haley Buick GMC, the place for a new Verano or Terrain Denali, on Midlothian Turnpike in Richmond and online at haleybuickgmc.com. Taking it to the streets and helping our community. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Information at vachamber.com.
I just received a letter from a student who thanked me for instilling the love of math in him. That's why I teach.
Brought to you by the Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a very special welcome back to Dr. Bill Hazel, Secretary of Health and Human Resources. Very much appreciate your being on, and we were talking before the show, there's so much that you could talk about, but I think one of the things that, beyond any introductory comments you want to make, is we have some slides that we'd like to show people that some
Death
some
by
work
PowerPoint
Yes.
on TV.
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you for having me back. But we wanted to talk a little bit about health and human resources and what we do. And we talk a lot about in the agency meetings is what do we do, how well do we do it, and how do we know when we're successful, and then how much does it cost. So as you try to put this together in a form that people understand, it gets pretty complicated. So the first slide that we'll show you here when they come up is sort of a list of the agencies in the Secretariat of Health and Human Resources, and they range from big agencies, spend a lot of money like DMAS, which is Medicaid in Virginia, the Health Department, Behavioral Health, Aging and Rehab, Social Service, and on and on. And if you look at the list of them, there are 11 basically, and when you look at the main things they do, this isn't even a complete list, but
even that number fills up the screen.
Yeah, they do. But here's the challenge: you put that up there and think silos, right? Now, I will tell you that in Virginia, when I go out and speak around the country, we don't confess to having silos. We have cylinders of excellence.
Yes.
And so
yes.
Those are our cylinders of excellence, and that's not even a complete list. The problem is, the citizens of Virginia don't fit neatly into those cylinders. When they come looking for services, looking for help, they touch multiple agencies. And in fact, they don't even touch these agencies altogether. For instance, education is out there, juvenile justice is another one. So there are other places where they interact with the state. So it becomes really an interesting thing about how do you show results. So what we've done is we've sort of taken the pieces and put them together, and they're really about 6 areas, I think, that we really would show results in. I think the next slide will show that. But first, you have to recognize we can't make people be healthy, but we can do things as a society and as a community to ensure that when they make choices, it'll be easier to make the right choice. So that's, yes. And we want our folks to be healthy and productive. Governor McAuliffe talks about the 21st century economy, and we need all hands on deck for that. People have to be healthy to participate, and that falls right into the health department, population health, the Medicaid services, behavioral health services, and so much of what we do. The next piece is on the top right is addressing poverty, and particularly intergenerational poverty. And what you want to see, I think, is not just that we are providing some supports and help for people, but that we're actually trying to ensure that they are able to get out of poverty. And this intergenerational poverty is a big issue. And we think it starts with the children, which is the second one on the left. We talk a lot in terms of the things that happen to kids, but what we really want are thriving children and families. And in Virginia, unfortunately, we don't do so well on getting kids started in life in areas. Some areas do really well, some not so much, but we look at the birth weight of babies. What determines, there was a study from back in 1978 that a gentleman showed me that basically can look at what happens to a child and predict what happens to a child by what's on the birth certificate.
Wow.
You know,
that's interesting, and it goes back to the late 70s.
Yep. And did the child get to term? Was it a full birth weight baby? Knowing that the brain's developing all this time, then is the child healthy? And these are things that need to happen in order for a child to read, say, grade level at third grade. And everyone recognizes that's an important marker. So when you work in one area with children, the results may not show up till many years later, but I think we have to show that. We have to show that. Then the next area is you do this work with the children while you recognize that something about the population that you and I see in the mirror every day, David, I hate to say it, we are getting a little older.
Yes, yes.
We are getting a little older, and in fact, the population's more diverse. So that changes a little bit what services government may have to look at, but it also talks about how you deliver it. Folks who may or may not be computer savvy, Internet's may be an issue for them. Folks who can't drive anymore need certain types of services or need certain types of social interaction. So we have to recognize that that's going on. And then you throw in this other piece that we spend a lot of time on Health and Human Services now, and that is helping individuals stay in a community. We have learned over time, whether it's mental health or behavioral health or just medical issues, when you take people out of their community, take them away for treatment or whatever, they don't do as well as if they are in the community. Then you have to add the fact that there are these natural supports, family, friends, neighbors, that those folks in Southwest Virginia know about stuff like
That's
this.
right.
You know, it's been there for a long time. And we have to get back to using these services or these supports and not medicalize all of it. So we have that whole piece. Then from the state standpoint, we have to recognize that most of the people who actually deliver the services for us are really volunteers. They're not working for the state. They work for localities or community service boards or area agencies on aging and so forth. So we have a real complicated mix.
And I think that what you're laying out for our viewers is sort of a preview of what you're going to be presenting in Barcelona.
Yes, yeah, I've been asked. We were joking earlier that got asked to speak at an NGA meeting a couple weeks ago that the NGA focus was getting results in government, and I think we do a reasonably good job here in Virginia. But what we're trying to do in the Secretariat is to organize and then think about how we demonstrate those results to the folks who, frankly, finance them, the General Assembly, the taxpayers. We owe that as well.
So the end result of all that is being able to show results.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
We can show on the next slide here the service system that we have that's really complicated. And if you go to the next one, what we have historically done is seen people, and then we send them place to place to place. And I think the next slide will show it. We'll get there, but this reminds me of practice in medicine. You know, my mom, when she had her gallbladder problem, she goes to the family doctor and gets sent to the hospital, and she gets labs and x-rays, and then gets sent to a cardiologist and more tests, and she's running all over the place. And none of these talk to each other. These physicians, you nod your head like you might have had some experience with that.
Right.
We're trying to work on that, but on the government side, we do that to people too. And that is probably a low value proposition for the individuals that we're trying to serve, but it's also a low value proposition on the service side because of the redundancy, the loss, and what we want is the sum of the parts to be worth something. We want the whole to be greater than the sum of the parts. So by going to a more coordinated system where an individual in a family comes in and you can say, look, these are services that are available. Let's get them organized to get the maximum benefit. We're paying for a lot of them already. We really are. The question is are we getting our money's worth? So,
so you could have someone in the family who was tapping into juvenile services over in one secretariat and who was in social services had some need, and then in the medical side. So it does parallel. I see your point. It parallels what can happen to an individual who's jumping from one physician to another.
Right, and I think what happens is when you go from one to the other, we had a situation where someone was complaining they had too many case managers because they had the case manager from social service, the case manager.
Yes.
Which case manager do I listen
Yes.
to? The next slide will, I think, show you, as we look at our programs, the big circle there is SNAP, which is supplemental nutrition, which was known as food stamps. But these are programs just in the Secretariat of Health and Human Resources, and how many individuals that are in each one. But again, the individuals don't come in silos. And the next slide is not from Virginia, unfortunately. We don't have the technological ability to do this. This is from another state. But you can see in some areas there are individuals here who are in 4 programs. 50, 60,000 in 4 programs. And I would submit to you that those individuals are somehow fundamentally different than the folks that are just getting a simple, when I say simple, a benefit such as SNAP or Medicaid. And the next one will show what we can do in Virginia. And this shows the overlap between the Medicaid population, the supplemental nutrition population, and TANF, which is Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, also known as welfare. And if you look at, you can see the green circle in the bottom, which shows the overlap between the 3, but the next slide shows the dollars. And so when you're in the General Assembly and you're looking at programs and where are we using our resources, it's a disproportionate amount that's in these multiple programs. So I think we need to think a little bit about how we organize our services over time and how we interact with these individuals and families to get better value.
Would it be accurate, as I'm reflecting on that, to say the greater the variety of services that an individual or family are tapping into, the more challenging their circumstance, and probably even the more challenging to come out with some positive results?
Well,
than someone who's just in a single one.
One would think. One would think that simple needs, if someone meets the requirements, say for Medicaid,
Right.
Which is pretty tight in Virginia, by the way. I know that's a whole other conversation we'll have again, most likely.
Yeah.
But a single program is a single need, and that may be short or long term. But when a family gets into needs where you're getting, say, Medicaid and you're getting nutrition support and maybe TANF, and suppose what's underlying all of this is a behavioral health issue, you're seeing multiple programs, each identifying a symptom, but perhaps not actually working on what the underlying issue is. And what we really would like to see with these individuals and families is not that they just get benefits, the check comes. That's not what we really are about. I think we need to be about how do we get these people to a situation where, if possible, they can be successful and productive and enjoy the opportunities that we have here in the Commonwealth Forum.
So this is, like I say, a portion of a presentation you'll be making, but I suppose also a goal from the National Governors Association to try to get the 50 states involved in being able to use this kind of analysis to have better results.
Yeah, well, some states have actually funded business process redesign in government. You may have heard of the Toyota model and lean production. Some states are using lean and actually have financed and funded people in organizations to go in and look at how are we aligned as government to do what we're supposed to do. And if I look at just the Secretary of Health and Human Resources, one of the things that we spend a lot of effort on is determining eligibility for public programs. And that's spread out amongst several agencies. We don't have an eligibility department. We've got lots of agencies, but we don't have a focus in one on eligibility. Kind of makes you wonder. Another that we have is we do a lot of licensing and inspection work. In fact, some facilities will be seen by 3 or 4 different licensing agencies just in my secretariat. And why would that be? Because most inspections and licensing are looking at similar things. There's common data like where you are, who you are, what you do, what your facility is. Those are things that you would think would be common. So, but why do we have this spread out amongst multiple agencies? And these are things we're trying to look at. We just had some VCU students in a course on data analytics at their business school came in to help us, and they looked at, this is just a little tiny piece of the program over in social service. And they ask, when they're looking at foster children, they're asking 68 questions. Well, they've analyzed it, and they figured out that 30 of those questions add no value. And it doubles, you can think going from 38 to 68 almost doubles the time that you're asking questions. Theoretically, if you cut off the time that's allotted to asking those questions, you can save $500,000 a year just in cost of spending time chasing down questions. So it's some of the things we do just aren't real efficient yet.
You know, our secretariat system in the Commonwealth just goes back to Governor Holton's administration, not that long, a short period of time.
Well, be careful. Secretary Holton sits next to me at cabinet meetings. So.
Right. Yes. Well, I was thinking that with the innovations and the leadership of Governor McCullough, you know, working with the General Assembly, it sounds like there may be a need in the Commonwealth to, I'm not sure what that secretariat would be called, but
you know, this is the challenge I have, is that I'm a surgeon, and what do surgeons generally want to do?
Operate.
They want to cut. They want to fix things,
right.
Repair the anatomy, right?
Yes.
So if you went back to my first slide there, you see the anatomy I have today, and guess what? Yeah, I wouldn't know how to fix it. If we can tear it up, but I wouldn't know how to fix it permanently. So what we're really thinking about is, how do you rewire it to work? You know, how do you look at the physiology of the organization as opposed to the structure? And so that's where we spend. So we mentioned Secretary Holton. A lot of what we do with children, whether it's foster care, whether it's the early childhood development, whether it's infant health, again, where do you see the results? You'll see the results of that in whether these children do well in school or not. Most likely, absenteeism is a good predictor of problems at home and vice versa. So being able to share the information with the folks who need to know is going to be real important. The same thing happens with juvenile justice, that same population of children. You know, we see recent articles about Virginia leading the nation in the pipeline from school to prison. Why would that be? And just being able to get the information and to act on it requires acting between Health and Human Resources, education, and public safety. And so we have to look at that at-risk population and design something that intervenes there, because what we're doing is not getting us where we need to go. Now, the last slide I had, if we can go to that, I think explains why it's hard. And when I was at the NGA conference, we were talking about all of these other governors are two-term governors. And we're one term. And so there is a bit of a challenge with trying to do a lot in a short period of time. But if you can see that, the last slide, go on to the next one, please. There were the 6 circles. And the one at the top is really funding stability over time. Say we decide we're going to set up, it's the one up at 1 o'clock basically, 12:30, 1 o'clock. You need some stability of funding. If you're going to do an innovative program, there needs to be a way to ensure it lasts. It takes time. You may have heard about the speed of government, but it doesn't we don't get things done really quickly as a rule. And there's a reason for that. So you want things to be well thought out. You want them to be applied fairly and equitably. But if you're going to get results, they need to last. And the 2-year election cycle, 4-year election cycle for a governor really is not conducive to thinking long term. The budget cycle, we do 2-year budgets and we adjust them every year. So when there's ups and downs, it changes things. So you have issues with that. The next issue that we run into is just workforce. It should be no surprise, our workforce is getting older. And as we look ahead, we need to think about how do you make it a real career in government? It is here. We need people to be excited about coming in, and if we're bringing in the younger ones, how do we use the technology that they're used to? They walk around with their cell phones, and some of us at the far end may not even really like to use the computer, so it's different. And we go down to other areas. It's balancing between specialization and access. When you're from Southwest Virginia, there are things that you can do in Fairfax or in Norfolk that just aren't likely to happen in Southwest Virginia because you're spread out. So we have those things to think about. So a whole lot of challenges that require some long-term thought.
And working with, as you said, a one-term governor, it makes it extremely challenging. It's helpful that some cabinet members span more than one term, and perhaps that we were talking earlier today with some friends about Secretary Rick Brown, and is this maybe his 6th or 7th governor? I've lost.
I thought he was with Thomas Jefferson personally.
I've lost count, but you have spanned now two, and it could be that there needs to be some position that almost systemically that spans, that tries to work on the coordinating.
Yeah, I think maybe that would be useful. I really do. You do need some long-term consistency, and the way Virginia is supposed to work, I think, is the General Assembly is supposed to provide that. I mean, they're the ones that, for the most part, last beyond administrations. So how they function perhaps more as a board, if you will, than folks who just come in every so often and pass policy and turn it over. You need to think that through, because to function effectively in that sort of a role, you need to really understand and really get into what it is that you're doing. And you need to follow board rules. You can't meddle down here with the employees, but you do need a long-term vision, and you need to agree on what you're trying to accomplish.
And I was thinking of the work the General Assembly does through JLARC, the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, that they could take the work that you've started and move it on and try to look at some systemic changes that could be made that try to help that it doesn't just another transition, and nothing really gets fixed.
That would be one way to do it, but I think what we do see, and I think Washington State has devoted $20 million a year to looking at this. I know there's a function in the governor's office in North Carolina where funds have actually been set aside to look at the business. Now, I think going back, in fairness, I think there are other governors have recognized this too. You have Virginia performs in an attempt to try to measure and set out some long-term goals, but you need to kind of stay at them.
In our closing minute that we have, any update on health care or any other issue you want to mention to our viewers? We're certainly going to have you back on to talk about those in more depth later in the year, but
well, I think it'll be an interesting year. The General Assembly has given us some assignments related to provider assessments, which are controversial. They've given us an assignment to look at certificates of public need, which are also controversial in healthcare, as we look at how the system should be going forward. We are pursuing various federal grants, such as innovation grants. We got some money in December to begin to develop a plan for innovation in healthcare. We'll see whether that money is still there in January when we're supposed to apply for it or not. So there is an awful lot going on right now and will through the summer. And I think hopefully by the next session we'll be able to sit down and have a real good grown-up conversation.
Dr. Hazel, we thank you so much for being on This Week in Richmond and this unique presentation that had a chance to see that you'll be presenting to the National Governors Association. We appreciate that very much, and we look forward to having you back on as the year progresses to talk about those initiatives that have been
Well,
worked on.
thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it as always and look forward to the next one.
Thank you.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com.
Alpha Natural Resources, a leader in mine safety and an environmental steward.
Haley Buick GMC in Richmond and online at haleybuickgmc.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community.
The Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.